Hi, this is your host. Welcome to our channel. Okay, so when you think of genes, you probably picture a long, winding ladder, the double helix structure of DNA packed into neat little bundles called chromosomes. You inherit half of those chromosomes from your dad and half from your mom. So when you have kids, you pass down a mix of your genetic traits to them, everything from eye color to predisposition to certain diseases. But here's where things get weird. While most of your DNA hangs out in the nucleus of your cells, some of it is actually located outside the nucleus in these little guys called mitochondria. These bean-shaped structures are like the power plants of your cells, taking in nutrients and churning out the energy currency of life called ATP. Here's a fun fact. Each of your cells has hundreds to thousands of mitochondria, especially in places that need lots of energy, like your muscles. And okay, we'll admit it. It's kind of weird. At first glance, these cellular power plants don't seem to have much in common with the spiral staircase in the sky. But look closer. Those twists and turns of mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, are actually more closely related to that nuclear DNA than you might expect. You see, like the rest of your DNA, mtDNA is a double helix made up of 4 chemical bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Remember the iconic A, G, C, and T bases that spell out the language of life? Well, mtDNA uses the same alphabet, just in a slightly different order. Like nuclear DNA, mtDNA is also full of genes that make proteins that do all sorts of stuff in your body, like transporting oxygen in your blood. Where things start to diverge is how exactly these two kinds of DNA are packaged. Unlike nuclear DNA, which is neatly coiled up inside the nucleus of your cells, mtDNA is folded up in a much more compact way to fit inside those tiny mitochondria. Also, while your body has 23 pairs of chromosomes in almost every cell, each containing thousands of genes, you only have a few dozen copies of mtDNA per mitochondrion. And the number of mitochondria in any given cell varies. So you don't inherit the same amount of mtDNA as you do nuclear DNA. But maybe the biggest difference between the two is how they're transmitted. See, while nuclear DNA is a mix of genes from both parents, you only inherit your mtDNA from your mom. And you get that exclusively from one tiny cell, the egg. Sperm cells do carry mitochondria in their tails to help them swim, but they shed those mitochondria before they fertilize the egg. So if you were to chart your genetic ancestry by following your line of maternal inheritance, you'd be tracing the path of your mtDNA. And boy, is that path ancient. Scientists have been able to use mtDNA to trace the genetic makeup of our ancient relatives going back hundreds of thousands of years. And they've found that all humans alive today can trace their mtDNA back to one woman living in Africa around 150,000 years ago. Scientists nicknamed her Mitochondrial Eve, not because she was the first woman, but because she was the only woman whose mitochondrial DNA has survived in modern humans. Researchers think this doesn't mean all other women died or went extinct. It just means we don't share their mitochondrial DNA. Since all humans alive today can trace their mtDNA back to this one woman, scientists have used this shared sequence to understand how humans migrated out of Africa and settled around the world. By comparing different people's mtDNA, researchers can identify genetic differences that arose over time and use that information to build migration networks and population histories. But that's not all mtDNA can tell us. You see, mutations in your mtDNA can lead to diseases that affect your body's ability to turn fuel into usable energy. One of these is called Leigh syndrome, a rare disorder that causes progressive damage to the parts of the brain that control movement. Other mtDNA mutations can cause muscle weakness, blindness, diabetes, and even cancer. What's really cool is that you can actually use your mtDNA to predict your risk for these disorders. Even if you don't have any symptoms, if you have a mutation linked to Leigh syndrome, for example, you may want to take extra care of your health or consider genetic counseling before having kids. Plus, there's some evidence that having multiple copies of mutated mtDNA increases the severity of these disorders. So knowing your risk could help you make informed decisions about family planning. And it's not all bad news. Some mtDNA mutations might protect you against certain conditions. For example, people who have certain protective mutations in their mtDNA seem to be less susceptible to Parkinson's disease. Knowing this could lead to treatments that target those protective mechanisms to prevent or slow the progression of neurodegenerative disorders. Mitochondrial DNA is also being used to develop new ways to treat mitochondrial diseases. Gene therapy trials are underway to replace damaged mtDNA with healthy versions. And since the energy deficiencies caused by mtDNA mutations often affect the brain, researchers are testing these therapies first in the eye, which is part of the brain. If successful, these treatments could eventually help alleviate some of the symptoms of devastating diseases. But it's not that simple. There are a lot of hurdles to overcome in treating these disorders, in part because it's challenging to deliver genes to the right place inside the cell. That's why labs are studying the basic biology of mtDNA and its relation to nuclear DNA to better understand what goes wrong when mtDNA is damaged. By understanding the normal functions of mtDNA, researchers can better understand what happens when something goes wrong, such as in cases of mitochondrial disease. And even though our understanding of mtDNA is rapidly evolving, it's already helped us solve some mysteries, like how ancient humans migrated around the globe. By comparing mtDNA sequences, researchers found that everyone alive today has mitochondrial DNA that falls into one of 7 major groups, indicating that all humans alive today can trace their lineages back to 7 women who lived in Africa 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. From there, scientists were able to identify the order in which these 7 founding moms lived and figure out which came first. These 7 founding moms are much more recent than mitochondrial Eve, suggesting that modern humans likely went through a dramatic population bottleneck, perhaps due to some extreme environmental event. But rather than being wiped out, our species bounced back thanks to these 7 women and their unique mitochondrial DNA. And that's not all. Some people's mtDNA gives them a literal superpower, the ability to endure intense physical activity without getting winded. You see, the ability to use oxygen efficiently is crucial for endurance. And certain variants of mtDNA help elite athletes convert fuel into energy at super speeds. For example, people of East Asian descent have a mutation that allows them to use oxygen more efficiently, which may explain why many elite endurance athletes from that part of the world dominate competitions. Meanwhile, certain Inuit populations have an mtDNA variant that helps them generate body heat in cold temperatures, possibly giving them an edge in surviving and thriving in the Arctic. These superpowers are great and all, but let's say you didn't inherit the winning ticket. Well, you can still learn a lot from your mom through your mtDNA. Companies like 23andMe offer ancestry tests that can reveal which ancient clan your mom's mtDNA belongs to. So while you may not have your mom's eyes or her amazing sense of humor, you can at least find comfort in knowing that her mtDNA lives on in every cell of your body. You're welcome. Now stay curious.